Well, good morning. And this morning, well, first of all, let me tell you that this is Keith Hayes broadcasting from Lewes in East Sussex, the southern county, stretches along the coast from the Battle to Brighton. And yesterday I was in Battle. It's a lovely, lovely town. It has its name because despite the fact that we historically call it the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror in 1066 invaded Britain and successfully defeated King Harold and took over, so that we had the Normans ruling for 3 or 4 decades, 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 centuries. That it is where Battle is the actual site of the battle, and where there is an abbey built on the site of where the battle actually took place, and where King Harold, at least part of him, is buried. I have to say that because there is some controversy about whether he's totally buried there or not. That's something for another day. But I did say to you that we... now, if hopefully we're going to get the technology right this morning, is that in the Battle of Lewes in 1264, when Simon de Montfort and the barons took on King Henry II, that they sort of sliced their way through the walls at Lewes and calling for attacks later on to make sure that the walls were not rebuilt, but were steadied and sturdied and made safe against intruders, because there's no point in having walls as people can get in very easily. And here is actually, you're looking at the last bit extant. Well, there are little bits and pieces around Lewes, but this is the biggest piece of the old town walls. And they, as you can see, are pretty sturdy. So it must have been the gate which they broke through, and that gate would have been here at the road, and now there is, it's known as the bottleneck, but it has some pretty historic buildings on it itself, but most of those would have been at the very earliest Tudor in origin, 14 or 1500, and then some a little later, 16 or 1700. But and there is the Masonic Hall, which was later again. And I am told, although I've never been in there, that there are some remains of the wall as well, which will make sense because it's right across from the remaining bit of the wall here. Which is in this delightful little courtyard with a chapel, which is a non-denominational chapel, called Westgate Chapel, and it was built, let's see, in 1662, and well, it was originally 1662, but it says the public worship in 1700, so it took a little time to get going by the look of things. Anyway, that's where we are this morning, and right here is the back of Bull House, which is where Tom Paine wrote some of his treatises on the rights of man. So that's your little history lesson for this morning about a small part of Lewes. Historic Lewes. And for those of you who might find the name Tom Paine a bit strange, he was a philosopher, and he was also a soldier. I mean, he's a customs man here, an excise man. He tried to protect or collect the duties on things like tobacco and brandy and so on that travelled through Lewes as a port. And it wasn't an easy job because the smugglers in those days were pretty vicious. And there is some reference by Melvyn Bragg in his book about Tom Paine to the fact that he he actually did take on some of the smugglers. But that's the only evidence I can really find at the moment that he did. Several of his companions, colleagues, were actually killed by the smugglers across East Sussex because they really, particularly a gang called the Hawkhurst Gang, which actually came out of Kent, but right on the border, and they were pretty lawless, and they even took on the British Army at one stage in the Battle of Robertsbridge, which is well to the east of here. But that's the sort of thing that Tom would have faced in those days. Anyway, let's get off the history and back to today. First of all, some pretty important things going on in Lewes next week. First of all, we have the council meeting, the first council meeting of the district council in May the 20th, that's Monday, at 6 o'clock, and that will be the first time that the new council has assembled. And I would imagine that there's an awful lot going on in back doors at the moment, back rooms, to try and decide who will be the council leader, which party will appoint the council. Because what we have is 19 Conservatives, I think it's 9 Greens, 8 Lib Dems, 3 or 4 Labour, and a couple of independents. Of course, I think that the sensible thing would be to appoint an independent as the council leader. But then you don't get much sense out of politics, do you? It is certainly not British politics at the moment. One of the things that is happening in Britain, in Westminster, is that, of course, pressure is being put on Theresa May to resign. It was said that at Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday, which is usually a pretty robust occasion, is that it was like a morgue, that half the people hadn't turned up. It wasn't a full chamber, which it normally is. That in fact Theresa May was very, very calm, and the questions were reasoned. I don't know whether sense has settled on Westminster. Wouldn't hold my breath. Perhaps there's a certain inevitability that she is going to go and that we're going to see change. Well, let's hope that we see change in Lewes, because there are some pretty vital things for this council to consider. First of all, of course, and to me the most important, is the merger with Eastbourne. And the merger with Eastbourne has been a complete and utter administrative disaster. It just simply hasn't worked. Whether that's because we don't have the quality of personnel to make sure that it would work, or whether in fact the differences between the two communities, because Lewes is quite small and Eastbourne is quite large, and whether the imbalance has created problems for the smaller partner, or whether the administration required for the different needs of two communities can't be reconciled. I have no idea, but it has been a disaster, and the new council is going to have to take a look at it, and that is one of the key features. The administration has just broken down. I mean, they've been in denial, and they keep on slapping one another on the back. Very interesting that I was talking to a resident of Battle yesterday, and they said that they went along to the town council and exactly the same thing. They said there are all sorts of things that are controversial, there are all sorts of things that need doing, but all they do is they congratulate themselves. What is it about the modern political class? Is it they really do believe that they're doing a good job? Or is it that they put their heads in the sand? Or are they just out and out bloody stupid and liars and if I may say so, verging on being thieves, because they take our council money and they pay themselves and they pay for this and they pay for that. And in fact, they're not delivering. So we'll see whether, in fact, this new council, because it is fresh blood. I mean, out of the Greens, apparently, there are 8 of them who are new. Out of the 9, there are 8 of them that are new. Now, sometimes it takes time for a council to settle down when you've got a lot of new people. Or, just occasionally you get a breath of fresh air and they discard the niceties of the last council, and they plough ahead, barging into treading where angels fear to tread. And perhaps that's not a bad thing right now, because certainly what's happened in the old style is just not working. I also was quite interested in finding out that quite a lot of people support President Trump, not because they think that he's particularly a nice man, but the fact that he took on the establishment, and so far that they haven't managed to get him. And that's the way we see the establishment at the moment as people, is that they are out to get us. And Nigel Farage is just booming ahead on the basis that the establishment, including the established media, I may say, seem to be out to get him. And the more that they do that, the more he gains credibility, because he's having a go. I know that he and Trump did have some talks prior to the president in the United States being elected, but I think that, personally, that we've had enough. We've had enough of old politics, and that all that old politics has done is just made some people very rich and some people very poor. And that is the sort of thing that you find it causes riots. It did in the late 1300s, when the peasants' revolt took place, and that was very violent. They broke into the Canterbury Cathedral and took on the Archbishop. They broke into the Tower of London and took on some of the king's men. They rampaged around the country, killing, murdering, thuggery. They got as far as Lewes, discovered a vat of wine in the castle, got drunk and moved on. But the situation was very similar. The conditions were very similar. And if that... I'm not suggesting for one moment that we're going to see a rampage of peasants or us lower common folk across the country. But what we probably are going to see is that we are going to express far more loudly, and perhaps through mouthpieces such as us, our displeasure at what's happening, and that the people there are not on for an easy ride. In fact, they're on for a very tough ride, because we're going to be asking questions, the questions that the people actually want to answers to. And there is plenty in Lewes that needs answering. But I think that that's going to happen right across the country. And I think that we are entering a new era. So perhaps what's happening at the moment with the great shake-up is going to turn out to be not such a bad thing after all. Am I right? I have no idea. But what I believe is put up suppositions and let you mull them over and decide whether, in fact, I'm just full of hot air, whether there's some merit in what I say, or whether, in fact, I raise debatable points. Because that's really what it's all about, is we need to talk about these things and we need to debate them. And the last council were proud that their debates were very muted and that they didn't actually shout at one another. Oh, dearie me, where have they been? You know, what were they trying to achieve? I've heard some funny things, but a debate without being raucous? Oh, my goodness me. Anyway, it's Friday. Monday is the telling day. That's when we have our first council meeting, and we shall be there, along with some of our colleagues, and we will keep an eye on what's happening, and we will let you know what's happening, and we'll give you perhaps a view of whether we think this new lot are going to be worth anything or not. Anyway, that's it for this morning, so all I can say is toodle pip. See you on Monday morning. Ta-ra. Well, good morning. It's